Old media is dying, but what's taking its place? The figures on the press speak for themselves. Globally, advertising revenue has fallen by more than $15 billion in the last 4 years, according to World Press Trends. In the US, the Pew Research Center documents readership has fallen to its lowest level since the 1940s, having fallen in 2016 by 8% on the previous year. In the UK, The Guardian reports print circulation is heading for a cliff fall. UK press barons, the Financial Times reports, have recently met to discuss forming a cartel to negotiate advertising revenues as a result of losing out to the internet. And it isn't just the press. In the US, says the Financial Times, advertising revenues for online platforms were set to overtake broadcasters in 2017. An explosion in mobile video will push digital advertising revenues to $75.3 billion in 2017, surpassing the $70.4 billion going to television broadcasters. And who are the giants in this field? Two platforms, Facebook, which also owns Instagram, and Google, which owns YouTube. Facebook and Google have cornered 1/5 of global ad revenue, according to The Guardian. On top of that, says Fortune, they account for nearly all growth in digital ads. By 2020, it's estimated that they will have 71% of online ad revenue in the UK. It's a global ad duopoly, says the Financial Times. The dominance of these companies in the media is extraordinary. In the second quarter of 2017, CNBC reports Google's revenues jumped 20% to $25.6 billion, driven by advertising revenues from YouTube and Google Mobile. It would be higher were it not for a $2.74 billion fine from the European Union for using its search engine monopoly to give its comparison shopping service illegal advantage. According to the advertising magazine Campaign, Facebook revenues rose by 57% to $26 billion last year. Like Google, their revenues are heavily dependent on smartphones, with Adweek reporting that Facebook gets 84% of its advertising revenue from mobile. As with Google, it's betting on video, with Facebook algorithms promoting video content to compete with YouTube. Facebook and Google offer users a service which is predominantly paid for with advertising. But that's not the whole story. What the digital platforms sell to advertisers is not primarily eyeball attention, but data extracted from clicks, searches, shares, messages, views, reacts, scrolls, and pauses, all analyzed, packaged, and sold on to the advertisers. The implicit quid pro quo, never explained, is you get a useful service in exchange for giving up privacy rights. They can analyze your messages, your contact networks, your travel routes, and the shops you visit. Google also has a deal with Twitter which gives it access to all tweets. So every time you use one of these tools that Google has developed, you give them access to a massive amount of raw material, which becomes big data. It isn't just sold to advertisers. Among the revelations from the whistleblower Edward Snowden in 2014 was that the US National Security Agency has a special relationship with internet companies through a program called PRISM. As he told The Guardian, if Facebook is going to hand over all of your messages, all of your wall posts, all of your private photos, all of your private details from their server, the government has no need to intercept all of the communications that constitute those private records. This new revenue system is transforming the way people access information about the world around them. Already in 2016, according to the Pew Research Center, 62% of Americans got some news on social media, and 44% got their news regularly from Facebook. As Fortune points out, no other single company comes close, but those that do are themselves platforms. YouTube ranks second with 10% of US adults, followed by Twitter with 9%. However, the added difficulty with platforms like Facebook and Google is that they are media organizations in denial. Mark Zuckerberg has written, "News and media are not the primary things people do on Facebook, so I find it odd when people insist we call ourselves a news or media company in order to acknowledge its importance." The problem is, that it is the major source of news for hundreds of millions of people. And it isn't a neutral platform, its algorithms steer people towards certain kinds of content. As a Vox writer complained, the order of posts in the Facebook newsfeed is chosen by a proprietary Facebook algorithm. This algorithm takes into account a variety of factors. Then it chooses the posts it thinks you're most likely to enjoy, whether they were posted 3 minutes ago or 3 days ago, and puts them at the top of your newsfeed. This means that Facebook has, in addition to getting most of its money from advertising revenues, demonstrated enormous ability to shape the public agenda. It does so mostly by generating buzz, since this is how it gets revenue. This means that in practice, that often the most bottom-feeding and sensationalist websites, including so-called fake news producers, end up being shared very, very widely. So Facebook is a major profitable media organization which produces no content, invests in no news infrastructure, and yet shapes the agenda through its distribution of news. Miguel Helft raises the question in the New York Times almost a decade ago, noting that it had started to provide sites with content as well as a search engine, resulting in the sort of conflict of interest which resulted in the EU's fine this year. As the company's operations expanded, New York Times columnist David Carr noted that Google derives 96% of its revenues from advertising, has a video platform that is currently negotiating with the National Basketball Association, a movie studio, and various celebrities, and is developing a subscription service that would be plug and play for publishers and consumers the world over. One could add that Google News is a major and widely checked newsfeed, which is organized by its own algorithms. It too shapes the public agenda. Unsurprisingly, neither Facebook nor Google want to call themselves media organizations, in part because that would imply responsibilities toward their users that, as data extraction companies, they've never had before. However, their status raises serious problems. Both companies get their revenues from the same source that previously supported news production. Neither invest much in any new production at all. The vast majority of their wealth is either invested in liquid financial stocks or hoarded offshore. Facebook, evidently seeking to avoid the calamity of actually paying taxes, has responded by launching the Facebook Journalism Project. As the Financial Times explains, Facebook will work with news publishers on reaching new subscribers, including a partnership with the engineering team at Bild, the German publisher, testing offering free trials to engaged readers from within its Instant Articles product. The company is also partnering with the Washington Post, Fox News, El País, and the Hindustan Times, among others, to develop ways to show more news to their readers. This may be an excellent way to mollify the old media monopolists in their decline without giving them a dime. But it is essentially just offering them a way to efficiently maximize their ability to make money out of a diminishing pool of revenues. But is big data even good capitalism? Many wild and extravagant claims have been made for it. Fortune claims breathlessly that data is the new oil. Business Insider reports that Google's chairperson, Eric Schmidt, has told a Google conference that big data is so powerful that nation-states will fight over how much data matters. In an excitable piece written for Wired, Chris Anderson claimed that such scale of data collection would soon render theory obsolete with enough data that numbers speak for themselves. So the bonus of big data is omniscience. Whereas neoliberals like Hayek argued that actors in a market had to operate on the basis of optimal ignorance, now the world can be turned into a readable electronic text. Not so fast. A major example of this was Google Flu Trends, in which users were told where the next flu outbreak would be based on Google search results. Initially it worked, only to falter in 2013. As Tim Harford reported in the Financial Times, Google's estimates of the spread of flu-like illnesses were overstated by almost a factor of 2. The reason for this is simple. Their data shows correlations, but it doesn't explain them. They have no idea what accounts for the trends they identify. Theory is not obsolete, which means that markets are not becoming magically transparent. And that means that advertisers have, to an extent, been sold a pup. This is a serious problem. As Reuters reports, Facebook is warning that its profits will stop climbing because it is hitting a limit in ad load, or the number of ads it can squeeze onto users' pages before upsetting them. Google is facing a potential clash with advertisers who are outraged that their brands appear next to extremist content on YouTube. But ultimately, their biggest problem is that while production costs are low, as capital-intensive firms, they have very little latitude for increasing productivity and very little incentive to do so. Their route to profitability was to monopolize a news service and accumulate revenues produced elsewhere. Now that's reaching its limits. So there are growing political challenges to their violation of privacy and cash hoarding, both central to their profit model. Are the Silicon oligarchs headed for a fall?